And that's the part that I think is such a societal aspect. It's like community building. It's like,
Yes.
that's what it is. Like in Holland, Michigan, like there's a lot of levels to Holland, Michigan. There's institutional roadblocks for people of color. There's also really great people in Holland that don't see race as a reason to not like somebody. And there's people that want to see Holland succeed. But also, like, the general rule of Holland is like, we don't want bad people to leave the city of Holland. We want Holland Public Schools to make good people.
Yeah.
I can honestly say that everyone at Holland Public Schools, there's maybe a 1% of that my graduating class.
The 1%.
The 1%. The 1% of shitty people that graduated in my class.
Yeah.
I can say that about my wife's class. I can say about that my brother-in-law's class. There's maybe a small film of people that are really shitty that graduated. But Holland Public Schools worked really hard to create good people. CPS tries to, but CPS has got so many aspects like working against it. It's got, the city of Chicago itself is fucking, segregated economically, racially, and socially. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, you had a public school system that's supposed to make it equal for everyone. You've got, people choosing to move. And I had a lady I talked to the other day. She was in line. Actually, okay, she was in line at getting raffle tickets when I was trying to get this Jordan shoe. And I don't know how they got up to church because she was there with her son, right? And she's like, yeah, my son wants to see shoes. His dad's house is over here. I'm going to drop him off after we get through here. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, oh, so do you live out here? She's like, oh, no, I live in Skokie. But he has a better opportunity at getting at a school if he lives at his dad's house. You know what I mean?
That's frustrating.
That's
frustrating. And that's where, we're punishing, especially with the way that schools are funded here, we're punishing kids for living in a certain area, and then people specifically move out of that area, thus removing the funding, thus double punishing again.
Yeah. The system itself is built to be exploited when really it should be built to like allow for a sort of malleable membrane of sort of equality, doing something here for a little bit to make it work. Mm-hmm. I think a weird thing like in like Michigan, for example, like school of choice. My parents needed school of choice because we lived in the border of Holland and Zeeland. Mm-hmm. My sister went to Zeeland, I went to Holland, and Holland is like deceptively more diverse. As in like Holland, the census I think a few years ago was like, I feel like 10 years ago, was like 60% of people were of Latinx or Latin descent. Mm-hmm. And then like the next was like identifiably white, and then was like Asian and black in this like little mixture. Mm-hmm. But the school system itself was so diverse that like it wasn't uncommon to go to quinceañeras in middle school.
Yeah. And
I've been to like my fair share, and I think it's so cool. But yet I know there's kids that go to school who maybe black in the South Side that have never been to a quinceañera because they don't have people of Latinx descent in their school system. You know what I mean? And those different experiences help make a person. They make a person. But also, if you're used to a certain environment and area and you're trying to protect your area, there's all these other elements that go into place. Like you sort of turtle shell because that someone's going to exploit any weakness. It's like I was reading the Michael Harriot from The Root had a good Twitter thread about was it Fred Hampton?
Buttigieg is a lying motherfucker. He's the one who wrote that. And he is, but go on.
He wrote about like the CIA's plot with like Fred Hampton and with like MLK and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And like the fact that the CIA wanted segregation in the city because they felt the races were easier to manage. That's terrifying.
Yep.
But that it worked and it stuck because now everyone's scared to meld their areas because, it could be exploited, Yeah. Imagine if someone, like some young person rises in Chicago and says, enough is enough. We got to unite these areas. They're instantly putting a target on their head. And the CIA is probably smart enough not to do that anymore.
So there's an argument that the CIA is the one who released the stories about oh, Russia wants Bernie to get elected. They did that because the CIA has a deal with the Washington Post, and the Washington Post is the one who broke that story.
Yeah.
And so one could argue that the Washington Post, albeit might have some good stories written in it every once in a while, because it's not a monolith. Like there are individual writers who might be working for them that are decent, but there's an argument to be made that is the outlet that the CIA and the other intelligence agencies, when they want to, like, oh, we really want to go to war with this country, we don't really have the facts on our side, let's just have the stenographers write exactly what we want. And they give them a press release, and then these reporters are thinking, oh, I'm getting an inside scoop, not knowing, like, no, you're feeding directly into what they fucking want you to do.
They're just giving you what you want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I would say, yeah, I mean, maybe they don't want to go straight MLK or try to assassinate, but they... I wouldn't put it past them, to be honest.
That's true. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't put past anything against the government, but...
they overthrow governments across the border.
You know what's funny to me? Like, someone the other day was talking about Snowfall and how cool it was as a show. And I was like, that's a true story, right? Like, the government really did that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not, like, I understand that you can't overthrow a government without casualties, like on a high level.
Yeah.
So I understand that we're working in the best case scenario of where we're at this moment in time. I get it, but you have to be aware of the historical examples.
MK Ultra.
You got to be aware.
Mind control experiments. They literally did them because they didn't work, because that's not what LSD does.
Right.
But like they tried to do mind control experiments on people.
People were hurt.
Yes. Those were American citizens. Those weren't overseas people. They stole American citizens and drugged them.
Unethical.
Completely unethical.
No one was held accountable.
No one. Yep.
And that's to me the different we're going to talk about politics. That's what makes real progressives. Mm-hmm. That's the linchpin to what politics should be evolving to. Is it should be about accountability. I don't believe any president is going to get elected without blood on their hands. Mm-hmm. Everyone who steps in that office and gets made the president, guess what? Someone's going to die. Jimmy Carter, I know, great Habitat for Humanity, builds great houses. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Carter's got blood on his hands.
Yeah.
Tyler Harrison was in office for 20 days? He's got blood on his hands.
Yeah.
They all do, because there's a world that we're not aware of, sure. Mm-hmm. But the idea should be to minimize as much impact as possible.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that, like, I hold accountable to every politician I have to vote, from alderman all the way up to president, is how do you minimize impact and how do you help build a better community? It's like the Maria Kondo of politics. Does this spark inspiration?
Yeah.
Does this spark good person? And that's what I want from my politicians. I can really give a damn about, where you started. I want to know, like, what you've done in the last 5 to 10 years to prove your point. And if you've done the same thing for the last, 50 years, like Bernie, awesome.
Yeah.
Then that means I trust you.
Yeah, then that's consistency, and it shows no matter what the context, your principles override whatever the best political decision is.
Yeah. And that's always been sort of my standpoint. I mean, I did debate and competitive, speech from the age of 15 to 21. And nothing, I used to want to work in politics so bad. I used to want to either be a speechwriter, work in the campaign room, because I loved I loved all of it. It was like Tech Week, but Tech Week was every day.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment that the air in my lungs left, and I was like, I can't be a part of this anymore. And I loved speech. I met some awesome and dynamite people in speech. But I was at a tournament. It was where was I at? It was my last tournament as a senior. It was my last national tournament, and I had this speech I was writing about how we talk about the continent of Africa and how our Western ideas lend itself to treat Africa like a country and not focus on the country, not focus on the individual countries, South Africa, Djibouti, all these areas that they exist. It's not monolithic.
Totally different. Yeah.
And how Western communities fucked that place. And so I'm talking to this in the hallway before a round with some friends. And this person who I thought was a friend and a person that, I had met through the speech circuit, looks me dead in the face and goes, "You don't really think we can fix Africa, do you?" And I was like, why the fuck would I be doing this goddamn speech right now?
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
Am I going to just talk for talking? Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm saying it because I think there's an answer.
I wrote this shit. I spent time on it because I believe in this shit.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, it drained me because I was like, fuck, am I trivializing what I care about by trying to win a fucking contest? And it made me really disenfranchised because I see some of those same people working for campaigns, doing things to win rounds. I remember in debate, like, I hated policy debate because policy debate was all about, like, if you're in the negative, how to win, strategy.
Yeah.
You know, take an unpopular position because you know you can win with it. And I remember you would run spending disadvantages, you know, weird critiques. And ultimate, and I'll never forget this, the ultimate way to win a round in a critique about a plan or an impact was to run a critique that was like, aren't you trivializing this by trying to win a round in a debate tournament on this day at this time because you have no other good arguments? Yeah, I remember my senior year of high school, it was how do we increase numbers in like national service programs or like the Army, like the Armed Forces, anything, the Peace Corps, all that jazz. And one of the plans that was around was about lesbian baiting, and it was about like why you have to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell because it leads to rape. Like women who were like either gay or not gay were being raped by superior officers under the threat that they were going to be outed and be dishonorably discharged. Like this was a real fucking thing that happened.
That's fucked up.
And I remember reading this and reading some fucking horrific stories and being like, it is so fucked up that we are making a plan to win a debate by using these women's voices and stories. And I just couldn't do it. Like I just like, and I wish,
you felt gross.
Yeah, it felt gross. And I wish like I would have had that in the front of my mind when I'm in college writing these speeches about things I care about, but ultimately being like, damn, is it fucked up? I'm trying to like keep a scholarship and win a tournament because I care about this thing, but also like how much of it is gamesmanship. Yeah. And that turned me off to politics solely. I didn't want to work in it. I didn't want to deal with it because it was all too juvenile. It was like,
it was petty.
It was petty. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I'm kind of like, you know, my general theory about like engagement is like, how authentic are you? You know what I mean? I want to see the next, I would love to see a revolutionized DNC. Mm-hmm. And I would love for it to inspire, and I would love to uplift its younger voices, not just the younger voices like that are acceptable to see on camera. I mean, to like really look within itself and go, hey, how do we do this better? Mm-hmm. How do we be a party that champions youth voices? You know? And,
that's not what they're about, though.
But how do they get there?
Well, so I think the way they get there, and this is just my theory on it, is a straight up hostile takeover of the party. I mean, I think just like primary challengers, outside organizations like Justice Democrats, which got AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, got them all elected.
Yeah.
I think you need those outside interests that are genuinely, they're funded, they're grassroots, they're funded by regular people, they have volunteers that are regular people, and they use their ability to organize and understanding of how campaigns work to pick up regular people who are really passionate, who just seem like they got a lot of potential for the job, and show them how to be a politician. But in the sense, meaning like teach them the game so that they don't play like a rookie, but have them going in because they're principled. Have them going in because they really believe in this shit. And there's a lot of people in this country who really believe in this stuff. They just don't think that they could be a politician. But I think we need to change that because Donald Trump proved you don't have to be a politician to win.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to be smart or have good ideas. You know, you can just rail against the shitty system and then you'll win.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like if we get a bunch of people who genuinely care about policy, who genuinely care about impacting the lives of everyday people, get the organization and the infrastructure of people who know the game, but who are passionate about these things, right? So that's the other important aspect. They can't just know the game and know how to play and not actually have any principles. They got to have principles too, but then have them teach all these regular people how to become politicians. So then instead of it being the political class versus the regular people, it's like it's the organizers that become the political class. And it really is just a bunch of grassroots movements that kind of overpower. And I think we've proven through Bernie Sanders' campaign and some of these other progressive people that have been elected, that it can be done through regular like $18 donations. It can be.
Absolutely.
Bernie Sanders raised $46.5 million in February. $46.5 million and 300, I think it was 300 or 350,000 new donors on top of what he's already had constantly contributing. So even if Bernie doesn't win this, which I think he's still very much in it, he's actually closer than he was versus Hillary at the same point in the competition, because that's what it is. But at this point, you know, he has some tough states that he really can't afford to lose.
Yeah.
Or needs to minimize the damage of the ones he's going to lose. But I think the more that Joe Biden talks, the more people are going to realize he's just not up for it.
Yeah.
And they haven't had a real good look at him in a while because they've been hiding behind 10 other candidates.
Yep. He's been playing the side game.
Yep.
He's been trying to little finger it.
Yes. He's totally been little fingering the whole thing. And I would argue not even him. I would say Obama's actually the one who's been little fingering it for him.
Ooh.
Yeah. Obama made a bunch of calls. This has been reported on.
Yeah.
I don't know how true it is, but Obama made a bunch of calls and said, Pete, you need to drop out. Like, and he had conversations with them all. And he basically told them all, like, you need to drop out and get behind Biden because you guys are not viable. And if you all stay in it, you're going to just hand this to Bernie. And so he did that. He stepped in and he stopped it from happening. And I can't believe it worked. It fucking worked.
I mean, but it's the system, you know,
It's protecting itself.
I think the other part is there's a lot of voting in fear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they want it. Biden's electable.
He's not, though.
And I go, 2016 maybe. Like
yeah. In 2016 when he was sharper.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like I remember Howard Dean.
Mm-hmm.
Howard Dean was so electable
until he had that coked
until
out.
he became a meme. Like,
Yeah.
but until he became a meme.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if that had never happened?
Mm-hmm.
Like Howard Dean, one would have probably been, he would have replaced Tim Kaine first of all,
mm-hmm.
or he probably would have been a front runner in his own right. I think that's what's really funny to me about this party is that like they're voting and they're playing chess.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing chess because they have to in a sense. But at this point, they're going up against a guy who's playing checkers and he can't count.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're seeing this like, and I'm like, you know, one of my favorite like analysis of the 2016 election was like, there were so many states and counties and communities that they just took for granted.
Yep.
And those communities were suffering.
Yep.
We saw it. I mean, hell, I'm from Michigan.
Yeah.
I saw like people that would normally be blue running people just feel like
Fuck these people.
taken advantage of.
Yeah, fuck
and then
fuck
here
these
comes
Democrats.
this fucking
They're not
dumbass
helping.
celebrity that, you know, had fucking Omarosa on his show and,
Yep.
you know, had whoever else pop culture wise was on that stupid ass show, The Apprentice. And they feel some sort of weird kinship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe him because he's like a wrestler. He plays a successful businessman on television.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kayfabe. Outside of the ring, he's a dumbass.
Yeah.
He's a dumbass that's managed to fall into like a successful path.
Yeah, well, he was handed a shit ton of money, so it's pretty hard to fuck it up from there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And but then like he just has a campaign director that says, yeah, go convince he knows how Ponzi schemes work. His election was a Ponzi scheme. He went to people who were willing and desperate and got them to invest in something that ultimately fucked them.
Yep.
And now those people in Michigan are like, man, we got fucked by this guy.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the DNC kind of picks up on that and they go like, well, I know Bernie seems like he'd be really good for you. But have you tried babbling Biden? Have you tried a guy who talks and double talks? Have you tried it?
Yeah. Have you tried the guy who said that he was arrested with Nelson Mandela in South Africa? Literally, dude, the frustrating part is the media is completely complicit because they're pretending like he doesn't do all these things. They're really not covering some of these stories in the way that they should. And they focus on this false Bernie bro narrative of like that everybody's just so toxic online. It's like, dude, no, they're toxic to you because you have horrible takes all day on TV, and this is their one chance to fight back to you.
It's I think it's like a weird. It's such a. There are people that have real interactions. Mm-hmm. Like there are people that I'm like I know and I politically like I love to hear their takes on it, and I love to like, and they're fucking intelligent. They're awesome people, mm-hmm. and they get abuse for Bernie bros, and I know that. Mm-hmm. It's obvious, and it sucks that that's their narrative. And I know that those same people changing their mind is not what they want to hear. They want acknowledgement. They want acknowledgement of their abuse. And I think that's what's important. And I think Bernie's like starting to learn that more, like you got to acknowledge this exists. But then the other side of that coin is that the media that reports on all of this has to discuss the depth of all of this, the layers of this. You know what I mean? Like there are layers. There are Bernie supporters who are very toxic online, that are very loud online. But the key word is loud. And it sucks that they exist, and we should all be wagging our fingers at them.
Sure.
But let's focus on the policies. Let's focus on the actual policies that people support. Let's acknowledge the abuse. Let's try to minimize it. Let's attack it. Let's get it away. But we do that by focusing on the actual message.
Well, and by the way, those same toxic people exist in every single campaign.
Absolutely.
They just don't talk about the other ones because it doesn't fit their narrative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I get the conversation piece, but I also just kind of I care about the actual
content,
and the policy, and does this person inspire me? And I take that for what it really is, because at the same time, there's a lot of things that we could all focus on that we're bombarded with from our various perspectives, that we can make a fight for, that no one wants to just spend all their time focusing on. Yeah. I would love that every time I spent physical cash, I would quote Dave Chappelle and say, here's a baseball card with a slave owner on it. Yeah. But man, that would make it really hard to spend money every day.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. Right.
So it makes it really hard, I think, for a Bernie supporter point of view, to be able to talk about the policies that are good and can help people, when those policies have this layer put on them by everyone else, being it doesn't matter, his entire culture is toxic, it's going to be bad for everyone. It's no, that's not that. No, it's not. Yeah, it's an oversimplification. And so I've heard an argument made by are you familiar with Ben Dixon? Yeah. So I actually talked about this with Eric earlier, but Ben Dixon talked about how the reason why they use this Bernie Bro narrative is the establishment's way of silencing the movement. They're basically saying, if you speak out against us, we will misrepresent you so that, it seems like you're being the asshole, and so that we can silence your voice. So you can stop critiquing. You can stop spreading this message, or, spreading the reality of how bad we're fucking you. We don't want you talking about it. So guess what? We're going to, in bad faith, make up this thing to try to silence you. And they don't do it for the other campaigns. And that he has a genuine double standard. There was a Bernie blackout for a long time where they literally just didn't cover him. And then they started realizing well, that didn't work. Yeah. He's the front runner now. So then they started just doing nonstop smear campaigns. But I'm you don't see this at any other candidate. That's got to tell you something. Yeah. Why are they only smearing one candidate? Well, I can tell you right now, if MLK was still alive today, he would be the Bernie. He would be smeared constantly. He would not be this beloved figure that everybody is putting him as, because he was considered a radical right before he died. He was killed because of his poor people's movement. He was killed specifically because he was making real ground and real progress, and he was for socialist ideas. He was for evening the playing field for regular people. So the fact that you have somebody like Bernie, who honestly represents a lot of what MLK stood for, literally marched with him. And then you have, these corporate centrists who are the exact white moderate that MLK talks about, you know? And I don't know if you saw this clip that happened where this surrogate for Biden, Hillary Rosen, she tried explaining to Nina Turner. She tried to she did the white splainy thing.
She did the white splainy thing.
I'm the white splainy. I want to Curb Your Enthusiasm episode about that. I want an episode where Larry David tries to white splain things.
Yeah. Well, what was so frustrating was one, she was wrong about what the white moderate comment is all about. But then on top of it, the fact that she speaks over Nina after Nina gave her a moment to say, okay, you can say your stupid shit you're saying, and now I have a counter for you. She didn't even let her counter. She was like, no, I'm going to interrupt because I know there's only 30 seconds left on this bit, and I'm going to just talk over you and counterpoint over you. And then on top of it, she was wrong. And then when she apologized in her tweet, she said, I'm sorry to the angry black women, or I'm just your apology is worse than what you did the first time. Like, you can't make this shit up. You can't make this shit up.
It's every 4 years. It's the circus.
Yeah.
It's the circus. I sincerely hope, my wish for all Democrats and liberals is that younger people start getting that confidence to like change the system, acknowledge what doesn't work. Just acknowledge it. You know, that's the first step, is acknowledging that something's not working. One of my favorite political moments, I think, is like one of the funniest sort of like a confederacy of dunces kind of moment is when the Tea Party came along and hijacked an election. Remember the freshman term Tea Party members? They're like, we're going to do this. We're going to have we're going to close borders, open guns. We're putting guns on eagles. They're shooting everyone around town. You know, condoms. Yeah. No, we're burning all the condoms. People only have sex in marriage with the opposite respective gender. They got into the Senate, they got into the House, and they got shut the fuck down.
Yeah.
All of the like old party Republicans were like, we don't do this here.
Yeah.
No. Welcome. You have constituents. Guess what? Your constituents don't matter here. And then all of those Tea Party members lost re-election bids. They laughed themselves out of like growing, which is good because they suck.
Yeah, we don't really want them to grow. Yeah.
But what I think would be the best reaction to progressive people showing up in the Democratic Party is, like you said earlier, helping learn them what the game is, but making sure their principles stick.
Yes.
So that when they become freshman senators, freshman representatives, they're able to come in, they're able to work with what they have, and able to honestly tell their constituents, like, hey, this spending bill, I had to vote on a plan plank I didn't like, and that I don't support, but this is what we're able to gain from it. We're able to gain more money towards Medicaid, Social Security, stuff like that. That's the meat of it. Yes. Everyone knows that you have to take the good with the bad.
Totally.
You have to eat shit sometimes. It's the machine. It's society. We're in it. We're living it. But if you don't acknowledge that you're putting shit in your mouth, then why are you even eating?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like if we can't acknowledge, like I could say that I spent 8 years campaigning for Obama from my senior year of high school to my time in college. I can acknowledge the benefits and the good things gained from the Obama presidency. But I can acknowledge that while it was great to have less soldiers dying, the inhumane element of war with drones came around, and that was hard for me to swallow.
Yeah.
But we can grow from that. We can acknowledge those moments. Go, you know what I don't want in my next candidate? Someone that likes the use of drones. Yeah. I want someone that likes to avoid conflict, you know?
Diplomatic solutions first. And then only in the worst case scenario do you resort to any form of violence.
Yeah.
Because there's some inevitable conflicts that you actually have to use for. I mean, like, we live in the world. Like, you know.
Minimize it. Be more diplomatic, you know.
Yep.
I think that's like, you know, it's like when we talk about like taxes with companies, like big companies. I know you're not going to rewrite a tax code in a year or 4 years. It's not going to happen. But damn it, what's got to be done to make it more attractive of an idea to have a more equal tax code? You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
And that's how you level the playing field.
Absolutely.
Because right now, you know, if all the wealth being generated is going only to 1% of the population, eventually there's no more wealth to be stolen from the poor people.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Well, and then you do that shrinkage of the middle class. It grows, it ebbs, it flows. And I think about this in the concept of like, we talk about taxes and people go, I don't want to pay more taxes. You know, I'm a business owner, or I work in a business and I make X amount. I make six figures. That sucks that you're going to get hurt by tax changes, and you shouldn't. The people that should be hurt are the people that are on your board of investors. But because they don't want to eat their humble pie, their slice, even you, higher middle class person, are unfortunately going to be affected. But if you were able to stand up and say, no, we should be paying fair and equal taxes, then your pie gets a little bit more even.
Yep.
The people that are paying uneven pies that make six figures and they have 4 kids, they pay for their kids' college, all this shit, those individuals could have a better form of paying taxes if their people that owned their companies paid their taxes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It makes sense.